ideas of it. I haven't gotten there yet.
Gotcha. So everything's situated now?
For the time being, we'll see what happens. I can't find my other camera, so we're just gonna have to go with this one, and it's gonna be awesome.
So I was talking to you the other day about what I'll be doing with the Unitarian Universalist Church. They're the CUPS organization. And yeah, it's pretty exciting. There's going to be a lot of people going to see it. So I was encouraged to cross-post the listing to a few other local pagan groups. One of the ones I help run. So there could be as many as 15 or 20 people. They said to expect that.
So how many in attendance do you expect, like in the audience, or how many usually attend the church?
Normally, I mean, normal gatherings, I mean, it's like 5 or 6 people. They're bigger events because they kind of run. The CUPS organization is it's kind of a branch within the Unitarian Universalist Church. They're a pagan organization, so they tend to be very generic pagan. They do they sort of follow the wheel of the year, like a lot of Wiccans typically do. So there's the Sabbaths basically, and for those you can get 10 or 15 people. So mine will be sort of replacing one of those because the person who was supposed to host it several months ago ended up going on vacation. So I had came in like a month ago, and they had asked me to host something since that date was free. So I mean, normally, if it was what it was supposed to be before, it would probably have 15 people, but I was not expecting that people would take any interest of it, any interest in what I'm doing, which is radically different than what they're accustomed to. They're typically used to something more on the sort of eclectic neo-pagan thing. What I'm doing is going to be very traditional. So
you plan on having it taped or anything so you can post it to something like this so we could see it, like see the whole thing?
No.
Or would that be?
I don't have any recording equipment, so.
Oh, okay.
And I don't think they would like that anyway.
Yeah.
Illuminati meeting. It'll be like a 2020 special. You'll get to see us actually sacrifice a goat. Yeah, because that's what all the Christians tell me that I do.
On that note, Will Pet Run Pet is coming up, and I think Kevin, you and I had talked about this before, which is pretty much the holiest week there is in the Kemetic calendar, minus a few days, but so numerous people have asked me to record it, and I'm kind of going back and forth about it, just because you'll understand that there's a I don't want to say it's secretive, but it's definitely a different perspective being a Reconstructionist, having people like sit in and watch when they don't necessarily respect what that is and why you're doing it, versus if it were to be a group such as Interfaith or another pagan group, whereas they wouldn't still be as receding as constructionalists or Reconstructionists would. I'm kind of going back and forth about it because I've never, one, filmed High Holy Week's ritual, and secondly, because it is the holiest time of the year, I'm a little reserved about that. So.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
So some discussion about this, because this is interesting. Like I know in other belief systems, like they worry about the recording and who they perform for, and like even in communion in Christianity, like you're not supposed to take part in ceremony if you're not a true believer. You're not supposed to drink of the cup or eat the bread or whatnot. I see it as maybe you're doing it more for your relationship to the deities or the deity or the earth or whatnot, and not for the viewers. And if the viewers get something out of it, that's a positive thing. But you know what I mean? Like what they take away from it is pretty much up to them. I would be very interested in seeing what you all are doing. And even if I needed to research it more to understand it better, and even if I didn't take it seriously the first time, maybe the second time I would, and maybe I would, see some symbolism in there that would speak to me. Like, evangelical Christians and people like that are not afraid to proselytize and do whatever. Like, you go on YouTube, there's videos of church services all over the place. I don't think you guys should be worried about that. And that the more you get out there, the more that you would educate people about it. Even though it's maybe a reserved kind of holy, keep it to yourself kind of moment, like there's a point too where you need to open up and express yourself to the people you're trying, to reach or show, which would be pretty amazing. That's why I asked you if you record. I'd be very interested in seeing something like that.
Well, it's very interesting that you bring this up because there was an article that was posted last week, actually, and it was distributed in some of the groups I communicate through, a lot of the Reconstructionist forums. And the gentleman who wrote it made an interesting point that I tend to agree with. Reconstructionists or traditional polytheists, we tend to have a devotional focus. So what you were saying before actually rings true. Polytheistic traditions like that, Hellenismos, Kemetic polytheism, Asatru, Celtic Recon, are God-focused. They're focused on relationships or veneration of deities and divinities, ancestors, and things of that nature. A lot of modern paganism as a whole, and particularly the sort of core that you typically experience in a pagan pride type environment or in a broader or generic interfaith pagan environment, it's much more community focused, which is interesting because that brings up a certain level of animosity. From the perspective of a lot of traditional polytheists, the view of a lot of the more eclectic neo-pagans, barring all the other conflicts ideologically speaking, one of the ones that we tend to take issue with is this very thing, because if you look at Christianity, you made the point earlier, it tends to be very community focused. That's actually a part of the reason for its success. And it's a part of the reason why it's proselytizing. And it's interesting when you're looking at very large pagan movements that have become very commercial, like Wicca, is that they're effectively, in some sense, though much more localized to specific groups, they tend to be more proselytizing than Reconstructionist traditions by very virtue of existing. Some of that is because they have so much already invested, because they've been around for decades longer in many cases than even Kemetic polytheism, which kind of goes back to the early 70s. 80s for the Celtic Recon, and not even till the 1990s did you start getting attempts to reconstruct Hellenismos. Whereas Wicca can go, depending on who you ask, back to the 1950s, 1940s. So they've definitely been around a lot longer. And a part of that means that they're some of the first people who established the sort of the auspices of the pagan community as itself, and even making definitions for certain terms that we commonly use, even if they're not the best terms to use to describe alternative spirituality. And I don't think that most people intend to be that way, but that's kind of been the zeitgeist of the pagan community, is that because we're a minority group, we need to get the word out there as much as possible, as often as possible. Whereas recon, we sort of exist on this sort of fringe, and by virtue of what it takes to do Reconstructionism, it requires a considerable amount of effort, time, and study, which is not everybody's focus. And because traditional polytheism is devotional in character, all of these sorts of things dovetail towards a more individualistic model into a much closer, more intimate communal group model, and less of a subcultural pagan model where you are pagan, you are a part of the pagan community. We tend to, if we're in the pagan community at all, it's by proxy. We're there because it's the community that's available, and it's one of the best ways to get ideas out there. But most of the time, and I'm sure that Isabelsa could vouch for me on this one, when we interact with the pagan community, yes, some of us are trying to start groups. We're small and trying to spread out. But most of the focus is on education. Because the vast majority of people you will interact with in a pagan environment do not even know what the word Reconstructionism means in the first place. They have no clue that these traditions even existed. I talked to a guy in his late 50s a few weeks ago. He had no idea what it was. There were traditions that were around him. There were people in the room that practiced Reconstructionism, and he could not connect the two dots. He'd been seriously involved for most of his adult life, and he had not even heard a term that's commonly used, has been since the 1980s. So that's what we deal with on a regular basis.
Not to beat a dead horse, but since Kevin commented, I'm a Reconstruction Comedicist, and I follow pre-dynastic, so I already have multiple problems. One, I'm a Reconstructionist. Two, I'm a pre-dynastic Reconstructionist, and mostly the Egyptian drive is either New Kingdom, which is after Egypt has been fused with a lot of Greek influence, or Middle Kingdom, which isn't necessarily the first mythos set or the first whatever. So it's a lot of give and take with me. I had the conversation this morning, I shit you not, where somebody was like, oh, what are you? Because my daughter goes to religious school, because it's the best private school there is in the area. And so she goes to a religious school, and somebody had asked me what our path is, and I said, I'm a Reconstructionist. And I got a blank stare. Like, no one had any idea what I was talking about. And so, because of the area that I live in, I was like, it's kind of like being Mormon, except for stricter. And they're like, oh, okay. So, like, literally, it was not even in the same vein of faith. And they're like, oh, okay. And I bet you $50 they won't even go look it up. Because, A, they don't care. And B, once they figure out what Reconstruction is, they don't want to sound stupid by not knowing how to interact with those type of people. And so they just don't ask. And they just kind of leave it be.
All right, so do you guys, when you do the rituals or rites, do you have a, since you're kind of like smaller, right? Do you have like an orthodoxy in the main group that gives you baloney if maybe you did something wrong, or do you get pushback from the things that you do? Is that maybe one reason why you maybe wouldn't do certain rituals in certain places or around certain people? Like, is that a problem for you guys? Like it would be. So say in mainstream Christianity or whatever belief system it is, you have like this group trying to do something, and you have an orthodox or a mainstream kind of people, pushing the little guys around a little bit. Do you guys get that at all?
I think I can feel this one. Um, the thing to keep in mind, and once again, this is a dead horse. We're bringing out dead horses tonight. Um, Polytheistic traditions, Reconstructionist traditions, I can't speak as much on more eclectic and contemporary forms of paganism. They are orthopraxic. They focus more on ritual formats, ritual structures, frameworks to which you practice the religion itself. So there are guidelines for how to practice. There are orthodoxies in all religions. The trifecta that I've mentioned many times here in the group is orthopraxy, orthodoxy, and orthopathy. Orthodoxy meaning correct beliefs, orthopraxy meaning correct actions or work, and orthopathy meaning correct experience, from pathos meaning suffering, emotion. Gnostic traditions would be considered orthopathic. Occult and craft traditions would be considered orthopathic. And I would argue that most modern contemporary forms of neo-paganism, particularly the eclectic forms, would be orthopathic, focusing more on experience than accuracy to historical periods or certain ritual or ethical frameworks. So are there orthodoxies within various different Reconstruction traditions? Sure. There are viewpoints as to what defines the essential worldview. In my tradition, we call it the cosmothesis, the worldview, the literally worldview. And in other traditions, it's different, but I hear time and time again that there is a worldview, and that's what you hold to. Many of my heathen friends have mentioned that that's what you always come back to is the worldview. It's just that it's not emphasized as much because, unlike Abrahamic traditions, polytheistic traditions are not orthodoxic by definition. It's an element of the belief system. The focus is more on praxis. I hope that kind of explains things a little better for you.
So, John, I haven't been around in a while. How'd your wedding go? And how are you adjusting to married life?
Things are going pretty well. Sorry, I'm going to turn off the video because my connection's a little bit slow tonight. Um, but yeah, it was. We had a wonderful honeymoon out in Hawaii. Got to see flora and fauna I've never seen in my life. It was the most breathtaking experience of my life. Scuba diving, helicopter rides, kayaking, swimming under waterfalls. I mean, it was ridiculous. And now that we're all settled in, things are going pretty well. Learning to live with each other, and that's a challenge, but we're meeting it pretty nicely. So that's really what it is from this point, just learning to live with each other. So. Yeah, sorry I haven't been on. Mostly I've been extraordinarily busy. Started a new job today and everything else. It's nice to have some normalcy though.
So Isa, I was kind of briefly bringing this up before. It's kind of what I wanted to bring up. Um, the sort of logistics of having people who are completely new to something. Um, there's definitely a lot of impetus for introducing new things, and in fact, several of the group leaders at this congregation have mentioned that if I have any other friends or associates who also practice things that are different than what they're accustomed to, that I should invite them if they're willing to host things. I talked at length with several of the group leaders and also the part of the larger UU, and they're not stagnating, but there's a sense that people have become a bit complacent. They're too used to the same song and dance, and they want something different. Um, they're basically trying to put their own money where their mouth is, and it actually stress inclusion. So a lot of the last few meetings they've had and discussions they've had have been about that, and I think that's a good sign that they'll continue and not just be kind of the same thing that any of the other ones down the way are. So that will definitely set them apart. But the fact of the matter is, it's still very, very new, and there's a restricted time slot. There's only a few hours that I really have to kind of introduce people to this completely different format, give them the knowledge that they need to be able to practice respectfully and be introduced to this new thing. I have pronunciations. There's only 4 words that are not English that they'll be saying. Traditional words following each segment in 4 sections. So, well, the 4 main sections in the center of the ritual demonstration. Rest of it's pretty easy, just having cups and having some fruit and bread and some kind of drink. Probably just do juice. Wine would be preferable, but there's going to be some people who don't drink alcohol, so that's fine. And I have almost all the printouts I need. I'm probably going to have to print out another batch. Fortunately, it's on double-sided paper, so it fits on two sides. So
with your drinks, are you going to do that charge to Dionysus, or are you going to kind of leave it as it is? Just because that's a lot of information to cram into a small section.
Yeah, Mythocosmos is just way too much to delve into for beginners, and I think it would detract too much from the specifics, because I'm doing the Panathenaea Tamitra, which is the lesser Panathenaea, and it's dedicated to Athena specifically. Really the only specific mentions that will be made, other than general mentions of the theory, are going to be Hestia, Athena, and Zeus. So keeping it very simple, very direct, concise, easy to follow, and not requiring a whole lot of different kinds of equipment. I mean, if this was an outdoor thing and this was more of a festival environment for an established group, that would be different. Then there would be a bonfire set up. There's some very particular things you can do in a much larger setting that I've been able to participate in at the Los Angeles group I used to be a part of. I'm still very close friends with the people who run that, and they've given quite a bit of advice and encouragement. So I've run a couple of things by them, and they think it all checks out, and at least one of them might be able to come out my way and attend, but no guarantees. Not that it's required, but it would be a nice gesture. They know that I can't make my way out there because it's quite a long trip for me to go out to North Hollywood. So, but it should be good. It should be good. I did a mock-up last night, kind of assembled everything together to see how it would turn out, and I think it'll work out okay. There's always going to be somebody who's going to be confused. That's just a guarantee. You know, I've been to interfaith circles before where things are being presented. You get confusion even just during a discussion of material. But the fact that people have interest and that they're asking questions is a much better sign than the alternative.
Yeah, I kind of tend to worry about the same thing. One, High Holy Week is an entire week, and to condense that into a public demonstration is confusing. B, especially if they don't have a mythos background. And then I'm like, well, if I give them the mythology background and explain it and this, that, and the other, then I feel like it's an information dumping, and then it's not cohesive to them learning because they're so busy trying to read all the information that they're not actually watching the demonstration, learning what it is to be a Reconstructionist, specifically a pre-dynastic Constructionist, because that's rare. To my knowledge, there are only 5 of us, so it's hard to figure out a balance between information to know what they're doing and not so much information that they lose themselves and don't pay attention.
I'm wondering if you could do something ahead of time, like, I know this might sound kind of crazy, but send out invites with all that information packed in. That way they've read it ahead of time. When they show up, you can do the you know, the rite or the ritual without them having to physically sit there and, you know, read it through before or while you're doing all those things. I don't know. It's just a thought, but
Well,
I don't know who you did to, but.
Well, at least on my end, and for what I'm going to be doing here, there's been a considerable amount of planning, about a month's worth of planning, and having everything listed and put up there in the first place. This is being facilitated because the group, they do their meetings through a website called Meetup. They do all kinds of different meetings of all sorts of different types, and so there is an event listing. They gave me control of the event listing, so I put in. Was there feedback? Okay, well, I put a description on the page, so they'll have a pretty good, concise understanding of what it's about before they go. But there's only so far you can go with a description. Welcome.
I feel like it's definitely a process, but I also feel like more Reconstructionists, especially Reconstructionists who have been doing it for some time, kind of need to come forward because trying to explain what a Reconstructionist is every festival I've ever been to in my life is insanely annoying. And so even if it's just like, you know, this is what we are, this is what we're doing, I feel like that would help with my headaches attending every festival I've ever attended.
I've actually kind of come to understand it, and I'm taking this from a psychology background in humanities courses in general. But it also has a somewhat of a pragmatic and scientific sort of thing. You start with the end product. If you're trying to teach a child something, right, or a teenager, you show them what the final product looks like. and then you show them how to get to the final product. Look at every tutorial you look for online, how to operate a program, how to make a spreadsheet, whatever the case may be. They almost always start with the example, the finished example. And then they have step-by-step leading to the final example. So what I mean by that in terms of this is the final example of polytheistic reconstructionism is that it's culturally specific. Don't jump into the process, the methodology, because they're probably not even going to have the interest in the first place. The best thing to explain to them is the final product is a culturally specific practice. And one of the best ways to explain that is how it works. And the best way to explain how it works is ritual. Part of the reason why there's been so many people that ask us to go and do these things, because when it's just on paper, when it's just in a forum, it just seems like what you said before, an information dump. All this information they have no context for. But seeing how it works in the flesh is the context. So I'm hoping that will improve as more communities are more receptive to inviting us and doing things and having us less as just outsiders for a sunset. On a more general note, and obviously it does tie into this specific, I had to set aside my own preconceptions when I went into this group in the first place. I was invited initially to hear a lecture. One of the people there she goes to a theological school, and one of her focuses is the classics. She was talking about the agricultural year of the ancient Greeks. So, I mean, that ties directly to the festival year and their holidays. So I was able to bring a lot to the table, and that's what got people interested in why they even invited me in the first place. But I had a preconception that as soon as they kind of understood that I was doing this very different thing, that I would be met with either indifference or outright hostility. It was quite the opposite, in fact. And one of the things I was able to stress to the group without protest, to the leaders of the group, is that I'm less interested specifically in what they do. The typical things that they host are kind of outside of the ken of what I do personally. They're of very little interest to me, of very little value. But fortunately, they have a lot of discussions and meetings and general kind of gatherings, more social gatherings. And I think going forward, and I think you might have a similar experience here, one of the best things to do is to take advantage of those, because that's where a lot of the networking happens, where you can sit down with people, have discussions, and share resources. But I think oftentimes the focus for a lot of people is they're looking almost to be entertained, and unless there's like a big event going on, they don't engage. So I think it's really sad when you get down to it, because there's a lot of people doing very different things. But if you only focus on the big events itself and not on the people that are there, you have this perception of homogeneity that doesn't exist. People just kind of assume you're all doing the same thing, and you see things all the same way. So playing devil's advocate, I kind of understand why, because there is matters of contention. Some of it's political, some of it's social. So I think some people want to avoid that. They don't want to have drama. They don't want to have arguments and make enemies before they make friends. But I think we've avoided it too much. Avoided the uncomfortableness of meeting new people and actually interacting and having mature discussions. So I'm glad to see that things have changed within, the last decade that I've seen a lot of these kind of events and these sort of gatherings. So I'm definitely looking forward to the future.
Well, I'm gonna head out, all. I'm gonna do some more reading before. I just want to stop in, see how y'all were doing. I haven't been around for a while, but nice meeting you all. Have a good night.
So, Isabel, I was curious. I know that you've been trying to get something started as far as group lives. We discussed that a couple of hangouts ago. But what networks have you been taking advantage of in the larger community? And how has it been successful? Has it kind of been a mixed bag?
It's kind of been a mixed bag. I've used several orthodox and very unorthodox social networking sites. Tried to see. I used the dark network. That was interesting. The dark network includes several different types of websites. Facebook has been used. Witchbox has been used. To be perfectly honest, actually word of mouth has worked better than anything else as far as finding people who have kind of the same basis in Reconstructionism, especially with the draw to Egypt. Yeah. It's been an interesting ride, but I've been doing it 5 years now, and we were up to 10 for a while, and now we're back down to 5 just because people didn't want to put the work in, but I kind of expected that, so.
In my state, here in California, word of mouth can work through social networking if it exists. If there are contacts that exist, they're near to you in some way, and they're plugged into the same social network. Facebook has really grown a lot because of that, and there's a lot that's come out of it. But when that has been exhausted and there's nothing that you can gain from it, there's just no one available. And it's the same for all the groups that I'm involved in, or friends of which I know who are running their own. They end up having to take advantage of existing systems, all the cult shops, like the little fixtures in whatever their community is. There's quite a handful in Southern California, or interfaith organizations like CUPS, and there's a few others like that. You have to start going out and mingling. It's not a thing of like, you have a friend of a friend of a friend who does such and such, and I have their phone number here. That happens occasionally, but it's very rare. The only reason why I was able to set up my friends, my close friends, and within their tradition, was because two people randomly showed up who happened to be doing the same thing as them. And I gave them their contact info through Facebook, and that worked out for them. But that is a rarity. Usually you have to go out of your way to an event specifically catered in that direction to find other people. And it's a complete gamble. You don't know who you're going to meet.
For a while, I tried to use Comedic Orthodoxy, thinking it would help, but it doesn't. And you and I have somewhat discussed the feelings that I have about Comedic Orthodoxy, and so I found a few people who will ask questions, but it's not really helpful. Primarily, when I set up a temple Facebook page and kind of gave a synopsis of what I'm trying to do. That and people that know about it who I'm friends with that are sending people to it is really how I got the numbers that I got. And right now I'm in the middle of setting up what I will call an academy, which is basically, here's the information that you need to know to tell me that you're serious about doing this, because I'm not going to take time. I mean, this has been a huge part of my life for almost 12 years now. So I'm not going to take months and years of my time to show and teach someone if they're not going to put the effort in to do the work. So, I mean, that kind of makes me the bad person, as far as most faiths are like, oh, we're accepting, let's give you hugs and candy. And I'm like, here's work, do it.
What's really strange about this current generation, though, there's more people who are turned on to alternatives. There's more access to the information. There's more people who are currently practicing these things. Yet there seems to be less of an impetus for people to actually get out and meet other people, interact, have any kind of discussion whatsoever. Some of my other friends who practice things very differently than what we do have talked to me that their experiences are very much the same. I know very old hard guard, like really old school Wiccans who remember in the early 90s, even leading into the 2000s, everybody wanted to try to find a local coven or a grove of some kind. And now it's like you're pulling teeth to get people out and actually having any kind of interaction. So it seems interesting that society and technology has moved to make these things easier, yet nobody's taking advantage of it.
And I've noticed that as well when I first started on the Reconstruction path. I mean, I've been pagan forever, but when I first started as a Reconstructionist, it was like pulling teeth to find any information. I mean, I'd have to call universities and go to museums to get the papyri and etc., etc. Now it's all scanned into the internet, and it's really easy to find it. It's just a matter of looking for it. But no one wants to do the work. And at this point, I've pretty much compiled it all together. Like, all you have to do is read it. And, so some type of, like, you read it, you comprehend it, you understand it, this is what you want to continue to do. But yeah, I've noticed that as well. It's really hard to get people together in the room to do anything, and then scheduling is a nightmare. Because as a Reconstructionist, I take holy days very seriously. Like, this is a holy day, etc., etc. People are like, oh, well, today doesn't work for me. Well, like, I'm sorry, I can't rearrange the solar system to make that work for you. Like, you'll get over it.
The one thing that stuck with me, well, two things that have stuck with me. A, even though the study itself can be difficult, um, the actual practice itself is actually simple. When you really get down to it, when you know what it is, it's easy to practice. And the second thing, as an extension of the first, is doing something is better than doing nothing. And that's what I have to explain to newbies is, oh, you have this specific thing going on at this particular time. Well, I have a dinner date. Then do something small. And if you do something, that's better than doing nothing. But people just get themselves worked up, and they have these very high expectations for the things they shouldn't have high expectations, and very low expectations for the things they should take seriously. Their priorities are completely out of whack.
Yeah, the other thing I happen to get a lot of, and I haven't really quite figured it out yet. I mean, I'm sure it's just a cultural thing, but is that people are really interested and they want to know and they want to play with it, but they don't want to take the time to actually expand on it. Like, I don't use the Greek names. I use the Kemetic ones, and that's just my own personal preferences. Mainly just because I feel like it connects better with me by using their actual names. But like people want to belong, but they don't understand that it's not the Greek version of Egyptian magic, and so it's a lot of trying to find that happy medium with people without being overbearing and be like, oh, you're doing it wrong. Because I mean, everyone has the ability to do whatever they feel called to do, but it's kind of a give and take for me though.
What I really see this being a reflection of is conditioning. Conditioning from the larger pagan community, which is this weird paradox. They want the super secret special old thing that makes them seem special, makes what they do seem legitimate, while at the same time doing whatever the fuck they want. They want license to kind of be free and open, and they believe that that's what defines these older beliefs. But at the same time, they want to use certain words and symbols and things that makes what they do seem legitimate. It's basically a holdover from adolescence. People who haven't grown out of this stage that they had when they were 15 or 16, where being pagan meant wearing a giant pentacle and scaring people off in your quad. You know, they don't grow past that, unfortunately, and a large part of that is not just themselves and their own character, but nobody's encouraging them to grow. You have a bunch of people that are just like that, who are totally comfortable with being complacent and not expanding on things and not putting in the effort. So people have to get to a point where they get sick of that, when they finally realize that it's not, and it doesn't have any substance, and they're not going to go anywhere further from that. So they kind of have to fall on their face before they realize, oh, well, maybe I should actually put in a genuine effort. Um, and not from lack of trying from everyone else. I mean, there are people who will say, you know, you can make these things better by putting just a little bit more effort and consistency. But they have to learn on their own. I've tried being the nice guy and, you know, giving them advice and giving them resources, but for those people in that kind of mindset, you're just going to fall on deaf ears. They have to learn on their own from experience.
I kind of feel like that happens with all faiths, though, not just paganism, but that's the one that I'm more versed in just because that's the one I grew up in. But I feel like Christians kind of have the same thing, and they search for this deeper, I don't know, this deeper connection with God, but they're going about it in very modern ways. And I could say the same thing for some of my Muslim friends as well. So I mean, I see that crossover in several faiths. I'm not gonna say all faiths, but I definitely see the crossover of people that have become complacent, and this is what we do all the time, and they don't really grow. And I don't think that's just in paganism, though. I mean, that's the one I'm aware of, just because I see it constantly. But
it's not even just religion. It's everything. I'm in a lot of culture groups, kind of geek groups that have to do with gaming and books and music and things like that. And the same sorts of problems with getting people out the door and getting them to go to groups, exactly the same. The same problems with people not taking advantage of resources, not putting in the time and effort. The same sort of thing. They come in it with preconceptions, they go in it, and then when they realize that this very narrow definition that they've applied, this very immature, romanticized opinion of what this community is supposed to be about, when that's shattered for them, they leave. Perfect example. The big group that I'm a part of is sort of, it's just general geek culture. We have people who come in who are just obsessed with anime. And they'll sit in the corner for a little bit, and then they'll bring up a conversation, and then when they realize that they're not everyone is into that, there are plenty of people who are, but they think that their specific little corner of the world defines this term, and when it doesn't for them, then they leave and they never come back. And that happens all the time. You have people who they just put their toe in the water. They never go further than that. And it's the same sort of thing. Do you want to be alone? Do you want to have social groups? Do you want to have interaction? Then you're going to have to, grow a pair, get a thicker skin. Some people aren't willing to do that yet.
okay, well, my little one doesn't feel good and wants cuddles, so apparently I'm gonna go cuddle my child. But I'll be back in a few minutes.
Okay, see you in a bit.